Holy Greenaway memos, Tim. It's the bat signal.
On your toes, Paul, old chum. More than likely, it's our most dastardly foe. The fourth season myth.
Holy wishful thinking, Tim.
No time to lose, Paul.
To the bat poles.
Welcome to the Bat Poles, the toy merchandising sensation that's sweeping the nation. Our To the Bat Poles toy microphones are selling out.
Yes, our action figures of us with messy hair and
headphones.
With me, it's very early. With you, it's very late.
Right, yeah, there's a play set of your room and my room, and one has darkness outside, and the other one has sun shining in.
Yes, and to simulate the distance, you throw one half of the playset out the window. That's how far away we are from each other.
Right. This is Tim in Tokyo with my brother Paul in Hanover, New Hampshire.
That's how far away I am from Tim. New Hampshire to Tokyo.
Yes. Our theme version this time is from the YouTube channel Chris Holland Guitar, uploaded April 16th, 2020. The video includes Chris's versions of various Bat themes, starting with Hefty, but also including the Danny Elfman version from the Tim Burton films, the Elliot Goldenthal theme from Batman Forever, and Hans Zimmer's theme for the Christopher Nolan movies.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris himself writes, I recorded these tunes for the Angry Video Game Nerd, AVGN, Batman episode in 2008. So, in other words, it was the thick of lockdown, April 2020, and he's occupying himself with putting old work on YouTube.
There we go. Yes, we all got through it the way that we got through it.
Yeah. So, yeah, guitar versions of everything. A while back, I was browsing the Dozier archive listing on the American Heritage Center site, and I noticed something called The Joker Jury by Hodge, Max, 18 pages, original type, no date. So I was curious, and I asked our proxy researcher, Barbara, to scan it for us, and we chose it as our topic for this episode. But then Paul discovered something. And yes. What did you discover?
Well, I did a little digging. There's something about this episode treatment. Of course, the episode was never produced. But both Tim and I independently thought this feels kind of Silver Agey. Mm-hmm. It felt like, pre-Frank Robbins, pre-Irv Novick, the pre-New Look as well. So I did a search for the comic, and there was, in fact, a comic story from before the New Look that is also called The Joker Jury, or The Joker. Yeah, they're both called The Joker Jury.
The Joker Jury.
And this story appears in the very last issue of Batman before Batman switched over to the New Look. And that's Batman 163 from...
the last Jack Schiff issue as executive editor, dated May 1964.
Right. Yeah, and I've got to say that the Jack Schiff Batman, as drawn here by Shelley Moldoff, I believe.
Yeah, Sheldon Moldoff, that's right.
It's sort of an eye widener to see this Batman with, the kind of weird... The weird anatomy, the black bat with no, yellow shield, the faces that all look like they're facing forward, even when their heads are tilted toward, a 3/4 view. If you look at the front cover, it looks like Batman's face is facing directly forward, but his head is turned a little bit to our right. Anyway, it's a little shocking to see that happening in 1964 when we know what the New Look looked like, just the following month in this book, and probably the same month in Detective, because I think the Detective issue that began the New Look was published a month before the first Batman New Look issue. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so there is a story in here after an alternate reality story of Alfred writing about what would happen when Batman and Robin got older and married Batwoman. Bruce married Batwoman, etc. etc.
So Alfred is doing speculative fiction. Fandom.com calls it an honorary imaginary tale. Because I guess the writing of it is taking place in the quote-unquote real world of the DC universe, but it's his imagination. So it's kind of like what they called an imaginary story, but yeah,
it's kind of more like Alfred's fan fiction.
Yeah,
he's shipping Batman and Robin, relationshiping Batman and Robin with Batwoman and Batgirl. It feels a little bit weird. At the end, when Alfred is giving them the stories, he seems a little bit like, "Ooh, I wrote something deliciously lascivious for Robin, for Master Dick," because he ends up getting down with Batgirl at the end of that story. Anyway, after that story is the Joker Jury.
Yeah, which is also the cover story of the issue.
So there are some similarities that we will talk about there. And Tim and I have both speculated, although there's no way to be sure, that Batman 163 might well have been one of the comics that was in the stack on Dozier's knee on the airplane when he legendarily, possibly more legendarily than actually, flipped through issues and was embarrassed that he was reading Batman comics on the plane.
Yeah, what was it? I think it was in the Cinefantastique issue that it said that he was hiding them in like business magazines.
Mm-hmm. I suppose so. Let's see. This issue of Sky Mall ought to be large enough to. I doubt there was Sky Mall in 1965 or 64. But anyway, it would be about the right time for Dozier to be, poring over copies of Batman, trying to figure out how they were going to approach the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I thought that we could, obviously we were going to speculate about why this was never turned into a full script, but we can also maybe talk about what Max Hodge may have been thinking in the tweaks that he made to the comic story in this treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts out with kind of a paragraph just about who the Joker is. I mean, this is clearly done early. I would guess there's no date on it, but I'm guessing it must have been done in 65. Because not only is it based on a comic, but it has references to supered titles. So that means that it was written before the decision had been made, or at least announced, to rather than putting captions on the screen to have Dozier narrate.
Right. The only snag in that theory, Tim, about the timing or the historical moment at which this treatment was made is on page 10. Part 2 begins with the narrator's statement, that is the writer's statement, open with the customary brief reprise of part 1.
The customary?
Yeah, exactly. So that seems more like it could have been written a little bit later, or else they had received, the writers, were able to get hold of some kind of, at least a minor set of rules or parameters for their scripts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a little puzzling, but yeah, if it were written too much later, I wouldn't expect the supered titles reference. So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, could have been like really early 66 and he just hadn't gotten the message about the supered titles.
Maybe, or, a Joker episode seems not to have been aired yet, but, the Joker showed up pretty quickly in the rotation.
The third arc. But yeah, there's a reference in here to the actor playing the Joker. So
right.
Hodge doesn't know that it's Cesar Romero.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the word customary has really got me scratching my head, though. So, customary compared to what, or customary of what? Actual episodes that he had seen, or just what, Dozier had told him would be customary, or Howie Horowitz had told him would be customary.
Okay, but I wanted to read this intro.
Yes.
Ho, 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 ha, 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 he. Boy, does that sound Silver Agey. The Joker laughs hysterically each time he commits a crime. His chalk-white face and green hair giving him the happy appearance of a clown, all caps. But behind this permanent mask of joy, all caps, is the sinister face of the hardened criminal, a crime jester, in caps, who over a period of years has caused Batman and Robin more trouble than any other villain. And then we get an added scene that's not in the comic of Joker at his castle, which does show up later in the comic. Mm-hmm. He has a medieval castle on the outskirts of Gotham City, which it's mentioned later that it was transported there from Europe brick by brick by some eccentric millionaire. So now in the comic, we see Joker in Gotham City having some run-ins with various government departments of Gotham City. Mm-hmm. The police department, of course, but also his car. He's driving around, and his path is blocked by a fire truck, so the fire department. And then, what is this? The Department of Public Works, he causes their truck to dump a bunch of bricks out to help him escape. I'm not quite following this, but... Mm-hmm. It was the city's fire department that almost stopped me, but because of the Department of Public Works, I'll make good my escape, and that gives me a new Joker theme. So he's going to use the various departments of Gotham City to commit his crimes. Now, in the treatment, we don't actually see him having any of these experiences. He's talking about them, but they're different experiences. A traffic ticket for overparking from the police department, threatening citation from the Department of Roads and Highways, demanding the Joker cut down the overgrowth that obscures an intersection, which has caused several bad accidents. What's wrong with accidents? The Joker loves accidents. He hates Gotham City departments, always telling him what to do. So I feel like, part of it is it's being told as exposition, mm-hmm. rather than us seeing it. That saves money.
Yes, it does.
But also, I feel like the examples that Hodge has come up with feel more bureaucratic.
Right. Like he's being, he's got red tape and paperwork dumped on him, that he's getting revenge on the bureaucrats for throwing at him.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe Hodge is thinking that's going to be a little bit more identifiable to the adult audience.
Yeah, good call there. I think that's right.
And so then Hodge also adds kind of typical scenes from the beginning of a Batman episode, Gordon and O'Hara. But before that, Joker is talking, this is also not in the comic. Mm-hmm. He's set up a guillotine called the Joker-tine, which I don't think really works as a...
I don't think so either.
Portmanteau word of Joker and guillotine.
I know, I keep thinking libertine instead, which I suppose you could count Joker as a libertine,
or
but still.
Ungantine or something.
Dentine, maybe?
Yeah. Listerine, that's not quite the same.
No.
Yeah, and it looks like a giant Joker playing card that slides up and down on two vertical tracks, and he's got a straw dummy of Batman that he chops the head off of with the Joker-tine. And he's planning to capture Batman, give him an absolutely fair trial, and execute him. And I'm like, boy, this is kind of intense for a kid's show.
Yeah, I should say so. I was expecting to see something. I would have expected ahead of time to see something like that in the comic, but not on the show. But of course, because of the Comics Code, that probably wouldn't be possible in the comic either. After, I can imagine it happening in the really early issues of Detective, perhaps.
Although we did see a guillotine in a Batman episode. Do you remember which one I'm thinking of?
I have a picture of it, but the episode doesn't come to mind.
Archer. Remember that weird scene where it appears that Alfred's been decapitated?
Oh, yeah.
Holy hostage, don't let him do it, Batman!
We'll have to leave that decision to the innocent bystander.
I would rather lay down my life than impair the efficiency of Batman and Robin.
Very well, then. Go to it, lads. thou hadst a good head on thy shoulders, whilst it lasted.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty disturbing scene for a moment there.
Right.
A guillotine did make it to the show, but not on a Joker episode.
Well, yes, and of course, a saw nearly chopped Robin in half and looked like it did at first because it was a Robin dummy. That was a Riddler.
Also kind of upsetting.
Definitely. Holy, you parted my hair.
So, now why has Hodge added this? Seems to be kind of like building up to the Joker jury trial later, giving us a taste of what Joker's planning.
I think what he's done is maybe, two things, one on purpose and one accidental. On purpose, his purpose seems to be to make the Joker's plot, visibly dangerous to Batman right away, and to show that Joker's the threat with the images specifically. Not just his, verbal threats, but actually showing the guillotine. But the inadvertent thing that Hodge has caused here is to put two themes right up front. First, there's the departmental, the department's theme. That Joker's going to go after, departments and make up, ruses based on departments in the Gotham City, civic library, whatever you want to call it, the civic system. And now he's got this medieval kind of, torture / death idea hitting us in the face. And I think what that does is immediately water down anything like a consistent department plot, or waters down that theme. So now there's like two themes competing with each other that don't really have anything to do with each other.
Yeah, it's a problem of the comic story that, like, why is all this department stuff going on in the Joker jury story? And Hodge is, I think you're right. He's trying to solve that problem. I don't know that he succeeds, because before I knew about the comic, when I read the treatment, I felt like, what's this Joker jury thing doing in the same story with the departments? Yeah. I mean, sure, it fits if we think of the Gotham City judicial system as being more or less, another department. That, the Joker is hijacked by putting together his own trial. But that whole connection gets pretty much de-emphasized when the trial and execution becomes, such a front-loaded aspect of the story's, thematic material. Mm-hmm.
Greetings from Wayne Manor Memoirs, a podcast dedicated to exploring the Batman mythos.
Each episode, we research a character, story, contributor, or piece of pop culture related or adjacent to the Dark Knight,
and try to understand why these topics are important to the Bat mythos. I'm Joe.
I'm Kendall, and some of our favorite topics include the transformation of Mr. Zero into Mr. Freeze,
the early appearances of the Riddler,
Booster Gold,
Commandi,
Jim Aparo,
and many, many more. Check out Wayne Manor Memoirs every other Friday, wherever you download your podcasts.
And follow us at Wayne Manor Memoirs on Facebook or at W Memoirs on Twitter.
Until next time, Bat Fanatics, be brave
and stay bold.
Jack Kirby's 1960s Marvel Comics work with Stan Lee created some of the most fondly remembered comics of the 20th century. If you're like us, you probably know about his early 1970s work for DC, but you've read little or none of it. Here at Deconstructing Comics, Emmett and I decided to change that. We've launched into a series of episodes in which we read all of Kirby's Fourth World, from the first appearance of Darkseid in Jimmy Olsen's book, to the long-delayed finale, The Hunger Dogs. What we found is unrestrained creativity that's a bit rough around the edges. This is Tim. Join us as we visit the Wild Area, the planets of New Genesis and Apocalypse, plus good old Metropolis, as we read Jimmy Olsen, The Forever People, New Gods, and Mr. Miracle. We're at deconstructingcomics.com, or look for Deconstructing Comics wherever you find your podcasts. Yeah, then we get Gordon and O'Hara. So they're looking out the window at a billboard that says, "Join your police force," etc. Joker, back at his castle, presses a button, and the billboard changes with, how does he describe it? by means of vertical strips revolving. Changes from a law enforcement plea to a laughing portrait of the Joker and the tantalizing message, Joker to Batman, watch every Gotham City department for clues to my future crimes. So, of course, the first thing that Gordon and O'Hara do is head for the Bat phone. Because they have no other recourse.
That's right. We have only one solution.
Ask somebody else to do our job.
Yep.
So at Wayne Manor, Dick is studying civics, and so we get some civic responsibility Bruce Wayne here. Dick is wondering why he needs to know all of this stuff about the departments of the city. Power and light, sanitation, health and welfare, etc. Why does he need to know all this? Bruce says, it's his civic duty, that's why. Every citizen should be acquainted with the functioning of his government. It is not only his right but his duty to take an active interest in the affairs of his city, his state, and his nation. It's a pretty long lecture for this show.
I'm hearing a Sousa march in the background. But, that's a pretty 60-60 way of tying in the theme to continuing the theme by having Robin/Dick studying something that's got to do with the problem of the episode.
And of course, Hodge had to add the Bat-pole scene and then going to City Hall. Although it mentions, and I don't think that they would have done this on the show because then they couldn't use the stock footage, but it says, outside City Hall, passersby are curious about the Joker billboard with the odd message to Batman, but Batman and Robin pay scant attention to it as they leap from their Batmobile and race up the steps of City Hall.
Yeah, that wouldn't happen. As you say, without the stock footage, there's nothing there. So.
Yeah, they would have had to go into Gordon's office and then look out the window and then see the billboard.
Yeah, and I think the billboard itself would have been way too expensive a way to produce, to produce this. Of course, the triangles, the triangular kind of prism-shaped long strips that change the billboard. I think that was done in the 60s. Yeah. It's certainly still done today in some markets, some big city markets. But it's still, just why not just read a note? They did it that way in the comic, and it was a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I suppose if they had tried to do that billboard on the show, they might have used a miniature, which they hardly ever did on the show. But
that is true.
The only time I can think of that they might have used a miniature was in the first Mad Hatter. You remember that view of the cowlless Batman dummy in the witness stand? It's kind of a weird shot that doesn't look like it was part of the shooting of David Wayne and the others. Looks like it was just inserted in there.
So maybe the establishing shot was just, was a little maquette or a set of maquettes and a little diorama, and then they just did the close-up of the chair with a kind of, short wall in front of it for the close-ups.
So now we finally join back up with the comic, which, this is the 60s. It's super compressed storytelling.
Right. So many plot beats happen on every page. You can hardly keep track of them all.
Yeah, because on that first page of the story, we've got 4 panels of the Joker and his run-ins with departments, a panel of Gordon reading Batman's mail, a letter from the Joker to Batman, which says the city's departments will serve as a basis for his future crimes, blah, blah, blah. Call Batman, and the last panel of the page, Batman and Robin are already in the office. And Robin is saying, his message says, I'm going to use my own sanitation department in a new way because I'm a fair-minded man. Batman, sanitation department must refer to cleaning up. As for fair-minded, if I know the Joker, I think I know what he's up to. And that's pretty much what's said in the treatment, too.
Yes, the message is, in this case, sent on an oversized Joker playing card. Boy, this guy's... Hodge is more Bill Finger than Bill Finger. And Bill Finger wrote this comic story where there are lots of big things, oversized props.
Right. Yeah, I think we forgot to mention Bill Finger wrote this. Yeah.
That's right.
But yeah, on the very next page, we got a giant vacuum cleaner.
I am going to use my own department to clean up in a new way because I am a fair-minded man. And then the dialogue ideas afterward are pretty similar.
Yeah, and then the treatment goes on to mention that the fair-minded comment means the fair, the international fair, being held at the government fairgrounds in the city, which is where we go on the next page of the comic. And yeah, this scene is like taken almost verbatim by Hodge. I mean, there are all kinds of phrases lifted directly from the comic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so in both, the Joker is driving this giant vacuum cleaner at the fair, and you can see in the comic an Eiffel Tower model, a Taj Mahal model, a genie statue holding a scimitar, and behind a sign that says Gems of the Orient, which is also described just that way in the treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And then Joker uses this giant vacuum to vacuum a bunch of jewels. And then Batman and Robin show up, and Joker vacuums Robin and starts to drive away. And then Batman uses bat rope. One of the shared phrases is a flip of the wrist as Batman's throwing the bat rope. That phrase is in both.
That's right.
He climbs up the genie, takes the scimitar, and apparently it's not part of the statue. It's separable from the statue.
Yeah, how about that?
Just in case Batman needs it.
Right.
And he rips open the bag of the giant vacuum cleaner and gets Robin out.
Moldoff has drawn it in the comic as though Batman is somehow slicing downward with the scimitar to the outside, just on the outside of the vacuum bag, but the slash is perpendicular to how his sword is dipping down. It's like he's slashing it downward, but the slash itself is parallel to the bag, the length of the bag, which I guess might be a way of suggesting that Batman didn't just plunge the scimitar into the center of the bag and decapitate Robin. Speaking of decapitation.
Sorry about that.
Exactly.
Sorry about that. Now, as both stories mention, Joker had the rear section of his vacuum cleaner gimmicked. That's the word in both of them. So that the jewels went to a separate section. And so even though he dropped the bag that had Robin in it, he still has the jewels.
How convenient. It's like a cow with multiple stomachs.
And Hodge adds the expression that Batman and Robin are left holding the bag of the vacuum sweeper. It's a little surprising that Finger didn't come up with that.
No, but it does seem appropriate for Desmond Doomsday to say. It fits with the tone of the show, certainly.
So then Hodge adds a scene back at Joker's castle, and Joker is celebrating stealing the Gems of the Orient, and he has a jewel room and a gold room and a currency room in his mansion, his castle. So it's kind of a filing system for the stuff he steals. Now I was wondering why add this scene. I mean, it fills out the script a little bit, but
yeah, it just seems expensive. And not just that, but expensive and needless. What exactly is Hodge trying to establish here?
Well,
maybe he just had an idea that he wanted to, throw in something like a reference to Uncle Scrooge or something, because I think Uncle Scrooge also has multiple rooms for multiple types of riches. It
might have been to mention the gold room because gold ends up coming up again later in the treatment.
Well, that's true.
Which is also something that Hodge added. It's not gold in the comic.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts writing another message to Batman on another oversized Joker playing card. So then we have Batman and Robin. In the script, they're in the Bat Cave. In the comic, I think it looks like they're at police headquarters.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They've received another message from the Joker. The way to success can sometimes be 3. This ends up meaning a 3-lane highway. It has something to do with the Gotham City highway system. You notice how everything on this show is at the city government level.
Yeah.
Gotham City, not the state, not the nation.
But that's kind of the way the comic was, too, I think.
It's the city highway system.
Well, I guess that just proves that Gotham City is supposed to be a microcosm for the country or possibly the world, to show just how powerful Batman's brand of justice is. It saves the earth.
Although I think the prison is a state prison, though, if I remember right.
Right, yeah, that's
Gotham
I think that's
State Prison, I think it's called.
State Penitentiary, yeah.
And, he has them using computers in the Batcave to figure things out. So he'd been clued into that aspect of the show.
Yeah, the Gotham City departments and duties therein computer. Another computer labeled Gotham City Highway System.
And by the way, notice that in the comic, this scene is 2 panels.
Yep. And there's a third computer that's dedicated just to armored car deliveries daily report. They must have like 7,000 computers in the Batcave, one for each specific piece of knowledge they might need to dig up in order to deduce, who is after what.
He would need to have like rows and rows of computer racks.
Yeah. How about this? The Gotham City Little League schedule for 1967. And then there's a different one for 1968, of course, because the computers can only handle, one algorithm apiece, I guess.
So, again, pretty much ripped straight from the comic.
Mm-hmm.
So, at the construction site of the new 3-lane highway, an armored Brinks-type car pulls up next to the construction company office trailer. 2 armed guards get out carrying 2 large bags of money. Joker comes along in a cement truck and dumps some kind of sticky substance. Well, I guess it is actually cement in the comic. I don't know that it's cement in the treatment. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the armored car guys are stuck there. And so then Joker's truck also has some kind of a grabbing arm that can pick up the briefcase that the armored car guys were carrying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Hodge goes into a kind of reverie, perhaps a nostalgic one, where he talks about how the claw works exactly. This is on page 7. The claw works exactly like the ones in the penny arcades where little boys fish for special prizes. Ah, that reminds me of a story.
The claw. Reminds me of Toy Story.
Yes, that's right. Oh, the claw. Yes, exactly. I have been taken, friends. I have been taken.
I go to a better place.
I have been chosen. Yes, absolutely. But to the rescue comes Batman and Robin in their trusty Batmobile. Okay.
Trusty. So
sounds like a line from Dudley Do-Right.
Yeah, well, and then in the comic, Batman spouts the most hackneyed line: "2 can play at this game, Joker."
I guess so.
But Joker drives away, and it's a convertible, and the treatment actually mentions it's a convertible. So it's a different car than what he'd been driving.
Right.
Yeah, a waiting convertible. But now, a difference here is that in the comic, Batman and Robin are unable to chase Joker because some trucks go through the intersecting street and then park there because they're driven by Joker's men, and then they just block the intersection. Where in the treatment, the Batmobile gets stuck in the sticky substance that Joker released from the cement truck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a change also. I was kind of wondering why. Is it somehow going to be easier to get the Batmobile stuck in glue on TV?
No, it seems like another way of making the event more visual, but it was plenty visual for the show to, like, make traffic stop somebody from getting through an intersection. In fact, heck, it was visual enough for Toy Story too, when the dog gets trapped near the end of the cartoon. Speaking of Toy Story, so that feels to be like something that if we had Dozier's response to this, there'd just be an X through it. It's like, revert to comic or costs too much would be the comment. But the nail, what happens next happens in both the comic and the treatment, that a nail is found with a square or rectangular head that Batman in the comic, Finger has him say it's rectangular shaped. Nails like this were made in medieval times. Dinner and tournament, says Robin. No, actually he doesn't.
Yeah, in the treatment, Robin finds it.
Bottom of page 8.
So, while Batman manipulates the crane hoist to help the guards, Robin inspects the abandoned cement truck, searching for possible clues. In the tire, he finds an unusual square-headed nail, the kind used in medieval times. So, yeah, in the comic, Batman is pointing out that it was made in medieval times, and I was thinking, oh, Encyclopedia Batman.
Yes, of course.
Yet another appearance.
He's even more of an Encyclopedia Batman, or maybe an Almanac Batman in the treatment, when it turns out, this Batman remembers the stronghold, quote unquote. The Joker had shouted something about his stronghold. Could it be the castle on the edge of town? It has a drawbridge with just such nails. Not only in the treatment, not only does Batman know that the nail has a square head, which places it in medieval times, dinner and tournament. Sorry, I can't stop saying that when I say medieval times, because that was the dinner and tournament restaurant where that I used to see ads for in Chicago all the time in the 90s. Anyway, it has a drawbridge with just such nails. Has Batman been inspecting the nails on that particular drawbridge to discovering that they were, by golly, they're medieval nails after all?
Well, you could dream up a story that maybe when the eccentric millionaire lived there, Bruce Wayne attended a party there or something.
Right. Yeah, actually, that's precisely what would happen on the show in a full script. I am absolutely certain of that. I think you're right.
Yeah, and he would remember noticing the nails, because who wants to pay attention to the other people at the party? Let's pay attention to the building materials. Well,
it's the kind of autism that Sherlock Holmes always exhibits as well, that he, I don't guess, I observe. Not quite the line, but looks at everything and deduces everything from everything he looks at.
So then in both versions, you've got Batman and Robin going out to the castle, climbing the fence. In the treatment, it says at night. The comic doesn't specify a time of day.
No, it looks pretty bright out in the comic.
Yeah. Well, would they use day for night in a comic?
Yeah, it was cheaper to film it with sunlight.
Cheaper to draw it in the daytime.
That's right.
And on the grounds of the castle, a bunch of Joker Jack-in-the-Boxes start popping out. And I was like, how are they going to do this on the show?
Yep, big props. I like big props and I cannot lie. Oh, yes, there. Yep, Hodge has got them all springing up with these giant Joker in the boxes, which I love that Hodge makes sure that we understand that these are not Jacks but Jokers. As the dynamic duo race, I was surprised by how closely this apes the comic as well. This is page 9. As the dynamic duo race toward one remaining avenue of escape, they fall into a trap, a huge hole in the ground, and they disappear down a long chute to a dank dungeon. Dungeon. Down.
I'm certain that if the show had tried to do a Jack-in-the-Box, there would have only been one. There wouldn't have been multiple.
Absolutely. There would not be 3 of them bouncing around. And it probably would have been much less descript. It might have even just been a Jack-in-the-Box. just a kind of plain-looking head wearing a jester's cap or something to keep the costs down.
Probably smaller than the ones in the comic, too.
Yes, no doubt. Although you're right, they didn't work with miniatures very often at all, if ever. So they would have had to build a full-size, kind of the way they had to build the full-size spring for Joker being catapulted off the pitcher's mound, even though you didn't actually see it happen.
Mm-hmm. So, the comic says that they lose consciousness going down this long chute. In the treatment, they are momentarily stunned. And then when they come to, in both versions, their utility belts are gone.
Mm-hmm.
And they're locked in a cell. And Joker is standing outside talking to them. Now, there's a line in the comic that gets a little garbled in the treatment. In the comic, Joker says, "This castle, this property is my city, and here I am judge and jury. Therefore, Batman, in a short while you will stand trial not for trespassing, but for your crimes against me." Now, in the treatment, now it's an indirect quotation, triumphantly, laughingly, he proclaims this is his city. He is the law. Now, this could be taken to mean Gotham City.
Yes, I thought so, too.
Rather than the castle. I think that's how I took it before I read the comic. Mm-hmm. So, it got a little fuzzy there.
Yeah, but it seems like the way that Hodge has emphasized certain words by capitalizing them, this is his city. I think the spirit here is that he's channeling what Joker says about the castle being his city. My suspicion is that would get put back into the script. The line, as it's presented in the comic, would probably be put back into the script once the script is actually written as a script instead of a treatment. Yeah,
well, if he was writing dialogue, cribbing from the comic,
Mm-hmm. And then Hodge introduces that they must stand trial not for trespassing, which is from the Finger script of the comic, but for crimes against him and his pursuit of happiness. I like that he's emphasized that there, because the idea that Batman is standing in the way of his and other criminals' pursuit of happiness becomes one of the main choruses, if you will, of Joker's charges against Batman and Robin. But I think that only happens in the treatment. The pursuit of happiness becomes so important.
Right, yeah. Hodge is adding some references to, like, the Constitution here and there, which are not in the comic.
Right.
Now, this with Batman and Robin in the cell in Joker's dungeon is the end of part 1. And I think Dozier would not have liked this as a cliffhanger, because they're not in a death trap, they're just trapped.
Right. Yeah, it could have maybe gotten under the radar in the early part of the series, where, lawsuit, lawsuit.
Right. Well, that wasn't the end
I know,
of
it wasn't
part,
really the trap.
But there is, the actual first Joker ends with Batman and Robin about to be unmasked. And we know, or at least we think we know from the Bat Coffee Table book, there was what I took to be an error there about identifying which episode Dozier was talking about, but I think he had to have been talking about Joker's Wild, that he wasn't happy with the cliffhanger because Batman and Robin were not actually in mortal danger. Right. So they may be in danger here, but they're not in mortal, imminent danger at that moment. Yeah. And sure enough, like through the whole rest of the series, there's never a cliffhanger about secret identity. It's always, actual danger to life and limb. Right. Even if it's hilarious danger, like giant clams, still danger. So part 2, which in the comic is the second row of page 8, which starts with Batman in the courtroom and Robin off to the side. Batman's right in front of the judge, which, as both the treatment and the comic let us know, everybody in the courtroom looks like the Joker. At the as the judge, as the cop, as all the jurors, they all look like the Joker. And Hodge mentions Production note, all speaking parts, i.e. judge, prosecuting attorney, clerk, jury foreman, are played by the actor portraying the Joker. So, hello, split screen.
Or just a lot of editing.
Yes.
So they could always have tons of people wearing Joker makeup, and then whenever they do a cut into a close up and somebody has a speaking part, they just have Cesar Romero do it in whatever costume you might be needing to wear, like a judge's robe, for example.
Now, the treatment adds checking in with Gordon and O'Hara and Ed Harriet and Alfred, which I think he does twice in part 2 here, which I'm sure some of that would have been cut if this had been done as an episode.
Yeah, I suspect so. There would only need to be one check-in to get that point across.
Mm-hmm. Now, and in the first Alfred and Harriet scene, Alfred has made the excuse that Bruce and Dick had gone off to trap coyotes.
That's good eating.
Then he says, unfortunately, it is not coyotes in the traps. I guess he means it's actually Batman and Robin in the traps.
Yep.
Now, the treatment has Batman and Robin in separate cages suspended from the ceiling of the courtroom, which we don't see in the comic.
No, they're just standing around. Again, Moldoff is saving a lot of money by keeping the props to a minimum and the unusual locations.
Hodge, why are you adding expense to this adaptation of a comic book?
Yeah, seriously, that's it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you think that he's trying to wow the audience.
He also has the what does he say? This is not any ordinary courtroom, but rather a hodgepodge of English/French/futuristic/bizarre/screwball, dominated by an extremely high, crazily angled judge's bench and an oddly angled juror's box, which we also don't see in the comic. It just looks like a normal courtroom.
Yeah. Again, I see Horowitz's or Dozier's red pen crossing all that out and just writing, courtroom. Yes. See if we can get the set from the Perry Mason show.
Well, I was reading the scene in the treatment, and I kept thinking, final episode of The Prisoner.
Yeah, or some German expressionist film when he mentions the judge's bench being, at a weird, crazy, impossibly high pitch from the rest of the room. I think of the factotum's chair in the first half hour of Caligari when Caligari goes to ask for a license to do his somnambulist stint at the fair, and this guy's sitting on this possibly tall chair that just represents how important he is compared to everybody else. Not going to happen on this show. Just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be too much expensive set building to build a Alice in Wonderland-esque courtroom.
It's a great idea, but it would work better in a comic.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a big budget movie, maybe, but
sure, and you could do it with miniature or with a painted backdrop or something.
But yeah, it's a bit kind of this absurdist thing because Batman's not hardly being allowed to talk. It's just this kangaroo court. Yeah,
I was a little bit surprised but pleased that the original comic is the source of, Batman acting as his own defense counsel. The judge says, so that the jury may hear you. And all Batman has time to say is, gentlemen of the jury, aye. And that the Joker judge raps his little gavel and says, that's enough. The jury heard you, and that's all I promised you. That's actually Finger's joke rather than Hodge's, but it seemed like it kind of fit with the behavior of the Joker as the series unfolds it. So, like I said, I was kind of pleased to know that was Finger's joke, and a pretty funny one, too.
So, yeah, and then here's another reference to the Constitution. Pursuit of happiness is guaranteed by the Constitution, argues the PA Joker, and the Joker's happiness is crime and criminal acts. Therefore, Batman is depriving him of his constitutional rights. I felt like this was almost as good as Penguin's argument about Batman is seen with criminals and I'm seen with police. That makes me more respectable.
That's right. I really liked this, and it's definitely a departure from the original script, which really just like has Batman say, address the jury, be heard by it, and then he's, proclaimed guilty. There aren't even any charges presented. At least not. Well, there is evidence presented, but we don't even hear the charges.
In the comic, there's the evidence presented as a photo of Batman interfering with the Joker on a past case. In the treatment, it becomes a film, which makes sense because we need movement on a TV show. Mm-hmm. But it's the same idea. It's a film taken without authority in a bank, which the Joker held up.
Right.
Taken by a hidden camera.
Yes. Proof positive that Batman not only took away the Joker's happiness, which money can bring, but this particular caper cost the Joker 2 years of freedom up the river, proving Batman literally deprived him of his liberty. Love it. Just love it.
Yeah, and then that's when Batman tries to speak in his own defense, but he can't say much. Now, a change that Hodge makes, in the comic, of course Batman's found guilty, and then the judge says, return the prisoner to his cell. I'll pass sentence tomorrow morning. Right now I have a little work to do. In the treatment, he goes ahead and sentences Batman to death by Jokertine.
Right.
So, kind of the payoff of that scene at the beginning of part one.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was still kind of wondering why we needed that. It's just maybe more danger to Batman. I mean, that would have been better as the end of part one, the cliffhanger, but...
Yeah, I suppose so. Well, it creates a hook, for the commercial break, I guess. We know now that Batman and Robin's execution is imminent. It does seem like a little bit of a letdown on plot momentum when Joker in the comic story says, I've got a little work to do now. I'll pass sentence tomorrow. We know what the sentence is going to be. Come on.
But then, he never gets to do that.
That's right. But he doesn't have a Jokertine either that he's, visibly, presented to us as
right.
That which is going to chop off the old dynamic heads.
So in both versions, then Joker says, this job is going to be good for my health. It'll be, talking about his next crime, it'll be a prize job, Batman, and I'll commit the crime right under your very nose. Ha. Now, that's changed a bit in the treatment because exactly the nature of the crime is changed a bit. Mm-hmm. In the treatment, he says, not only will this caper be good for my health, it will assure you, Batman, that you will always remain a golden memory in my castle long after your execution tomorrow.
What could that possibly mean? Dun, dun, dun.
So then we've got Gordon and O'Hara again with a new message on the billboard. Batman found guilty, execution tomorrow, and they're just freaking out. And Wayne Manor, Aunt Harriet is still concerned about Bruce and Dick. When will those naughty boys be back? Alfred tries to reassure her all is well, but his face is ashen as he scans the big, bold, black headlines in the Gotham City Gazette. Batman Robin threatened with death by mysterious captor.
Then Alfred goes into the den and obsessively watches Roadrunner cartoons where the coyote wins. He's thinking, if only they'd gone out and trapped coyotes instead.
So then both comic and treatment show Batman and Robin in their cell, and they're trying to figure out Joker's clues about his next crime. And since this is supposed to be his last meal, quote unquote, he asks the guard for some food, tomato soup, steak, and ice cream. And then in both stories, both versions, he uses the tomato soup to put spots on Robin's face. I don't know how well that would work.
It works great in a comic book. It would work lousily in a television show.
Yes. And the guard is convinced that Robin has smallpox and runs away. Now, the comic doesn't mention what the ice cream is used for, but in the treatment, Batman sticks it down the back of Robin's shirt to make him shiver so he'll look more like he has a fever.
Right, which is kind of genius, I guess. I wonder about the steak, though. Is the steak supposed to, they cut the steak up into a long string and make it look like his intestine is like unfolded and come out of his mouth or something? I don't know.
Maybe they ate it.
Maybe they could.
They're
he could have
hungry.
given. Maybe that's right. Maybe Batman could have given Robin a black eye, and he could put the steak on it. But it would need to be raw to fulfill that mythical property of steak.
So after the guard runs away, they're trying to reach the key that's, a little ways away from the cell. Now, the treatment mentions that Batman unravels a thread from his woolen sock. I don't know that Batman wears woolen socks, but maybe in the winter, bat socks. But he ties this string to a bent fork and throws it out of the cell to hook the keys. And all I could think of was Holy Brady Bunch.
Yeah, seriously.
The Grand Canyon 3-parter.
But, this is exactly what he does in the comic.
Yep.
The fork is bent into a hook, tied to a thread unraveled from Batman's wool sock, and now I'll pull
it does
in.
mention the wool sock in the comic. We don't see it, but yeah, it's there in the narration.
Yep. Again, compact storytelling in a 60s comic.
So then this part is a little bit different. In the comic, we are now at a charity benefit honoring Batman and Robin, and there are papier-mâché replicas of Batman and Robin flanking a large jar of cash, which is made up of donations to this charity.
Mm-hmm.
And there are pretty girls dressed as Batwoman who are kind of the assistants to this event. Now, in the comic, this is taking place at the newly completed Cape and Cowl Children's Hospital. Terrible name for a children's hospital. I don't care if it's related to Batman.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of threatening.
It does. Decades later, after everyone had forgotten what the Cape and Cowl stood for, it's just become a goth children's hospital. Only for goths.
And at the children's hospital, there's no jar of cash, and the figures of Batman and Robin are gold statues.
Mm-hmm. And there's no Mr. and Mrs. Expository showing up at the benefit saying, look at those pretty girls dressed as Batwoman. And yes, and notice those papier-mâché replicas of Batman and Robin in quotation marks. I love that. Only in a Jack Schiff Batman story from this period.
Yeah, and then the young lady dressed as Batwoman is explaining about if you don't win the cash, you may win one of these consolation prizes, models of the Batplane and Batmobile.
Mm-hmm.
So then in both versions, suddenly some what appear to be masked doctors walk in. Now, in the treatment, that makes a little bit more sense because they're in a hospital. And I think that's probably what Hodge was thinking.
I'm sure.
Why are these doctors, dressed up for surgery showing up at this event? People would be suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
And these doctors are announcing that the room may have been infected with a contagious disease. So this
Smallpox.
place is quarantined. Yeah, there's a lot of disease in this story. Or lying about disease.
Yes.
No one actually gets sick, just a lot of lying about it.
Dupe diseases.
So they're under quarantine until they're all inoculated. Please file into the next room while we fumigate this one. But, of course, one of these quote-unquote doctors is the Joker, which for some reason, he's wearing a complete plastic head over his face so that you can't see the white face.
Yeah, that's a heck of a over-the-head mask, and I'm sure it was very convincing, as all over-the-head masks are.
But interestingly, the reflector thing on his forehead stayed there as he took off the mask.
Well, compressed storytelling. He could have taken it off the mask, put it on his head, during in the panel border, or the moment that's elided by the panel border.
Right. So rather than stealing the cash out from under their noses, as he says in the comic, their noses being the noses of the papier-mâché Batman and Robin, he's actually stealing the gold statues themselves.
Right.
And they put them on like gurneys and cover them up so that it looks like they've got patience.
Right. But here it turns out that in the treatment, it turns out that Batman and Robin are actually the statues. They have posed as the golden statues. And so they have to be covered in gold paint for the rest of this scene, pretty much.
Yeah. Now, you would think that the henchmen would notice that when they picked up the statues. Like, gee, that's funny. This feels like human flesh rather than gold.
Yeah, why does it have so much give? Huh, well, gold is soft, so that must be the reason.
Well, let's see. Maybe all the Joker has to do is place the 2 golden statues on the gurneys, throw sheets over them, wheel them out to the waiting ambulances, and rush them to their final destination, the Gold Room of Joker's castle. Ah, so simple. Too bad Batman isn't here to see this frightfully clever caper. He would appreciate the cunning, the ingenuity, the resourcefulness, the absolutely foolproof, hold everything, zoom, it can't be, it is. Batman and Robin leaping through the air, a golden Batman, a golden Robin. The life-size statues have suddenly come to quote-unquote life as Batman and Robin leap from their pedestals onto the unsuspecting doctors. So they never got to pick up the quote-unquote statues.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that solves that problem.
Yeah.
But the zoom with 4 O's, is that a stage direction to the cinematographer? Zoom in. And the cinematographer appears to be like between 3 and 5 years old. Zoom in. Come on, you can do it. Just go and say zoom while you're doing it. Anyway.
So then, of course, there's a bat fight in both versions. In the comic, Batman and Robin take a hold of the papier-mâché figures, which appear to be just flat.
Yeah.
Because we see the backs of them, and they're just black, and you can see the edges. Mm-hmm. So it seems more like wood rather than papier-mâché.
Yeah, an inch thick at most from what the drawing looks like.
So, and of course, the fight takes like 2 panels. Actually, maybe not even that. Well,
there isn't even really. Well, I guess there is a fight in that Batman and Robin shove the papier-mâché, those deadly, heavy, probably very pain-inducing papier-mâché models of themselves. They throw them in front of themselves to knock over the Joker's henchmen. But then the fight is completely cut short by, well, I guess they use their special reflectors, which also happens in the treatment.
Right. Yeah, Joker and the men use the reflectors on their heads. Batman then reaches for a switch that starts up the model Batmobiles and Batplanes in the comic. It's Batcopters in the treatment. And the explanation for the models is different. Rather than them being consolation prizes, it says part of the ceremony was to have been a demonstration of these authentic models which contain tiny motors. So that explains why they're able to move like this. Rather, if they were consolation prizes, there probably wouldn't be a switch handy to turn them all on.
Yeah, and they'd probably all be made of balsa wood. So the treatment ends with the doctors subdued. Gordon, O'Hara, and the others rush back in. Naturally, they're surprised to see 2 live gold statues, in all caps, but they're delighted to have Batman and Robin safe and sound once more. As for the Joker, he will end up in a department of Gotham City, the Department of Corrections, and that's Finger's joke from the comic as well.
Yep.
Batman says, you need correcting, Joker, so it's fitting that you should wind up in the Department of Corrections. And, of course, Joker's in his purple prison scrubs, grinning at them, of course, as Batman and Robin stand outside the cell.
Mm-hmm. So why was this not ever turned into a script? Maybe just because it would have been too expensive? I mean, they probably could have reduced the cost in certain places. We've seen them do it with other scripts.
Sure. Some of the scenes that are much more elaborate than the comic scene could have just reverted to the comic scene, or they might have been changed in some other way to make them less expensive. I can't imagine anybody even thinking twice about trying to, decorate a courtroom, for example, to make it look anything like the way Hodge has described it.
Maybe there was concern about the Joker teen bit?
Probably, but that's, that
could have been eliminated.
It could just be eliminated without harming the script.
Or it could have been the problem that we've talked about, that the jury thing doesn't seem to have anything to do with the department thing.
Yes, and it could have. It really could have, but the way that Hodge chose to emphasize the jury thing seems to have divorced it entirely from, the discussion of the various departments that Joker is exploiting as fodder for his clues. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It could have just been that there were too many. They had a bunch of Joker scripts that they were, keen to produce already whenever this was written.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen there were quite a few Joker ideas coming up at this stage. We've talked about some of the other ones that weren't used. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it might have just been a matter of prioritization.
Yeah.
But, this story, just from the beginning as a comic, it just doesn't seem to have quite been thought out well. Mm-hmm. It's kind of got two separate stories going on.
Right. You can you can almost hear the theme running through Finger's head. Deadline, deadline. I've got to write this fast. I've got an idea and it's vivid, so I'll use it. And I've got another idea and it also is vivid, so I'll use that one too. And I won't bother to try to squish them together because nobody will care anyway. And he was right. I'm sure, I know, from what we know about Finger that he wasn't a careless writer, but, deadlines are deadlines. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but there's nothing about this that jumps out at me as being, the reason why it wasn't adapted or, why it didn't go forward into the script mode. I'm interested to hear what listeners might think about why this doesn't work.
Right.
There's maybe something we're just not seeing because we're paying attention to other things in the treatment.
Yes, and I'm sorry I did not share this one ahead of time, but you can look at it in the show notes.
Oh, good. Yes. Excellent.
And I'll also link to the comic since it's freely available on view-comic.com.
Yes, that's right. Don't know how they do it, but it's out there.
Hello, I'm Ken Holtzhauser, and if you're looking for something new in comic books, may I recommend my newest comic, The Quick and the Dad, a love letter to the DC, Marvel, Archie, and Harvey comics of my youth. This comic has everything. It has spaceships, dad jokes, alien invasions, time travel, supervillains, and so many bad puns. Hopefully you'll like it. It's the cutest comic you've never heard of, and it's available today in print and digital from indieplanet.com. That's The Quick and the Dad. Join that other dynamic duo, won't you?
Coming up, more Bat audio of Adam West on the Merv Griffin Show, and we read your mail in the Bat inbox. This show is listener-supported through Patreon. Support us for $2 a month and get access to outtakes from every To the Bat Polls episode, including this one. Trivia quizzes on 20th century entertainment, recently focusing on 1970s pop music. And you'll get the right to vote on future Bat Polls topics. For $4 a month, you also get the right to have an ad for your own project on the show once a month, and hours of exclusive podcasts, including our walk through the early years of The Amazing Spider-Man, a new episode every month. And we're rapidly approaching the transition from Steve Ditko to John Romita Sr. So go to patreon.com/deconcomics and select the level of your monthly donation. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.
If you know, I shock you. I was going to do your show when I came out to Hollywood. I'm coming out to Hollywood on Friday. And I start rehearsing at once, so I can't.
What were you going to play, Hermione?
I don't know. They didn't tell me. They said, something stupefying, I suppose.
Wonder Woman?
Wonder Woman, probably.
Wonder Woman, yes.
Yes. Maybe in charge of the ladies' bathroom.
Yes, I like that.
You've also been in Rome. Adam?
I'm sorry I keep on looking at you. But I think it's so fascinating because I do watch you as Batman.
Is my cape coming out?
I got to admit.
I like you better dressed
No,
like
Adam, it is a
that.
thrill to see you.
Really?
Sure.
Yes.
Because we always see you with that
Yes.
cape and the outfit.
Well, that's very nice of you, really.
We see you in person. And
Because it's fun to be here without the cape
Do you ever feel silly in the cape?
No.
What's the matter? Well, what about you? You played butlers with the tails hanging out.
You feel silly in your tails?
No.
I don't feel silly in my cape.
I agree with you, but he said, what an extraordinary question. Having made a very good joke, he did, a pun, and then he suddenly says, you feel silly in your cape.
No, I would wonder. Now, you have to do personal appearances.
Yes, I am too.
Adam?
It's
Adam?
very serious in my cape. That's what...
But did you choose it? Did you choose the get-up?
Well, of course not. Could I?
I don't know.
You think he would choose a cape?
Choosable to me.
A robust boy like me to choose a cape. What are you saying?
I have a feeling he's putting us all on.
He is too.
Now, I'm serious. When you go out in personal appearances
Yes.
and there are a lot of kids and stuff, and there you're standing with a cape and your blue booties.
Yes.
Do you sometimes think, is this what acting is all about?
Sometimes. But what I really think is this, that, and I tell them, to me, there is nothing
All right, leave it there.
that so strikes terror, it so strikes terror into the hearts of criminals everywhere as the shadow of a giant bat. Now, I ask you, really, would the shadow of a chipmunk
No.
or a goldfish?
No.
No.
Well,
See,
why
that
don't
wouldn't be
they-
my fear. My fears would be to come on with all those kids screaming
Yes.
and walk on the stage and trip or something. then I'd feel silly.
Merv, that is a very serious point because there is limited peripheral vision in the cowl, you know, the blue thing with the eyebrows that I wear. And so I'm always crawling along, you know, checking the floors and the ground to see if I am going to trip. And the floor or the ground at the circus is not very regular. You know, there are all kinds of obstacles. Elephants, you mentioned.
Bat Inbox, mail about our episode on bat costumes with Chuck and Lynne Williams. Paul, take the first one.
All right. So this is from Jim Aiken. Jim writes, I've had a really busy year and I'm way behind on all podcast listening, including to the Bat Polls. The timing was right to catch this installment right when it dropped, and I really enjoyed it. The description of the way Adam donned the cowl was new to me, and it would be very hard to put all the emotion behind that moment into writing. Hearing it in person was fantastic and surprisingly moving. Thanks to all involved. That's really nice.
Cool. Okay, then we have Andy Fish, who wrote, I thought Chuck and Lynne were great. I was disappointed that neither had the Midwestern accents I was certain they had. Lynne was especially smooth, and when she revealed that she really isn't all that big a fan of the show, I laughed out loud. Holy revelation. Chuck wanted a Robin costume before Batman? What the heck, Chuck? Robin, the boy target? I'm enlightened but disappointed nonetheless. Wink.
Nice. Well, you know, there's something about being a kid that kind of makes you think, well, I'm not really ready to be Batman yet in some cases. Not all kids think that way, but I'm sure that there were at least a few kids who thought, well, I'll be Robin now, and then I can grow up and be Batman. Nah, that would never happen. Every kid wants to be Batman. Who cares about Robin?
The rest of the thread on the message board became a discussion of some of the good and bad points of our show, and we're not going to go into all that here, but we just want to thank everyone for their praise and constructive criticism, and we'll do our best to keep it in mind as we continue making the show.
Absolutely. It was a good wake-up call, and we appreciate the conversation that came out of that discussion. Let me see. I seem to have lost my document in my attempt to look up a bunch of other stuff at the same time.
Okay.
Here we go. Email from Steve Small. Tim and Paul, I wanted to ask about your comments about the Joker's wig. Was Cesar Romero wearing a different wig in the movie? Was it the lighting of the wig or a combination of both? I never think about Cesar as a ginger redhead because it never bothered me. There are stories about Susan Oliver's green makeup in Star Trek The Cage pilot film. That's got me thinking about how I think you and I used to like sing "Green Chick" when Susan Oliver would show up in the last image on the ending credits of the first season of Star Trek.
I don't remember
green
that.
Chick, green chick, green chick, green
I don't even remember
chick.
watching Star Trek with you very much, because I didn't get into it till college.
I remember watching it with you right before I started college, when I was 18, like, probably July and August of 86, working on like projects, like putting together a comic box for myself to hold my comics while I was at college, and watching Star Trek reruns with you at, I think, 10:30 on Channel 9, KCRG. Anyway, but changing the colors of clothes and backdrops for black and white film as opposed to color film can go back as far as Republic Pictures' Adventures of Captain Marvel and The Adventures of Superman. When George Reeves' Superman costume is different colors than the comic books, I've read that the costume's colors were changed to separate the contrasting colors. Yes, that's absolutely true. If that's true, I can accept that. I feel it actually works. But if I watch George Reeves' Superman with a color costume on I Love Lucy, then I change my mind because that costume works even in black and white. That's Steve's comment. Wasn't there one color season of the Superman show?
I'm
really not sure about this. I need to spend some time with it. I found myself, I think, a copy of the whole series on DVD that I simply have never, cracked into because, it's like 772 on my list of DVDs and Blu-rays I still need to watch. But anyway, interesting.
So yeah, the wig, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm certain that there was more than one wig. Certainly, a while back I went through the show. I don't think I compared to the movie, but at some point in mid-season 2, his wig gets lighter. A brighter green. And I think what Chuck was saying was, well, what we talked about in that episode, it's coming back to me now, that the original wig that you see in the first season didn't look good under the lights. And it looked kind of muddy. And apparently it wasn't really what they wanted. And so later on, they've tried different ways of making a wig green and got better results later on.
I see.
Although I think in the past we sort of interpreted that as symptomatic of the show itself becoming more of a sitcom, but apparently that's not the case.
As far as Cesar Romero being a redhead, I know that was true when he was younger, but I thought that by this time his hair was pretty much white.
Yeah, I believe so. Certainly if you see him in those Disney movies with Kurt Russell or whoever, it's
right,
white.
And even in Ocean's 11, which is early 60s, I believe, where he plays a gangsta. So I have an instant fact check here. So the Superman series on television ran from 52 to April of 1958. And the last 4 seasons, the first 2 seasons were filmed in black and white, and the last 4 were filmed in color.
Huh.
Now, in the mid-50s, there weren't many people who had color televisions. There weren't even that many people who had televisions compared to, by 1960, although, the numbers had skyrocketed since 1950 or so. So I suppose what they were doing was getting it ready for, syndication.
I guess. They must have known color was coming, that eventually it was going to be in every home.
And these were the days when, television broadcast networks still had some stake in the building of televisions. Remember, NBC was a subsidiary of RCA way back in the beginning. So that may have been on their minds as well, trying to advertise the purchasing of color TVs or make them look even better and more necessary.
I see. Finally, an email from Chris Kavanaugh. Hello, Bat Buddies. Your guest's reference to an East Coast collector is likely the collector Dan Greenfield has highlighted on his 13th Dimension blog, and he includes a link from 2018 where Dan did a series of posts of photos of these costumes held by a collector known only as Alfred. I'm sure that's not his real name. And yeah, it's pretty spectacular to see those costumes, laid out on a table.
Yes, and I'm sure that some of those costumes were probably lent to the show at the Hollywood Museum that I saw about 5 years ago now, because even the dummies look like the dummies. Dummies that were created to look pretty close to close resemblance to the actors who played the characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll link to that initial post that has links to the other posts in it.
Mm-hmm. So this is something that I meant to mention during our discussion of Joker Jury. There's another later version of Batman, Batman on Trial plot in the Batman the Animated Series episode from season 2. Episode 4 originally aired on May 16th of 1994, called simply Trial. And this is from the Batman the Animated Series wiki, just the synopsis. Gotham's deadliest criminals, the Joker, Two-Face, Mad Hatter, the Ventriloquist, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy, among many others, kidnap Batman and put him on trial in Arkham Asylum. The Dark Knight's only hope rests with the District Attorney Janet Van Dorn, who, despite her anti-Batman stance, is forced to defend the Cape Crusader's life as well as her own. So, different plot. I thought initially, when I saw that there was a trial episode, that it might have been yet another version of Batman 163's story, the Bill Finger story. But alas, it was not. Was that 163 or 183? I guess it was 163.
Yeah, issue 163. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just wanted to toss that in case anyone would like to look it up and check out any, resemblances that I didn't catch just from looking over the episode summary and plot summary.
Okay, so recently we did another Patreon poll at patreon.com/deconcomics, and we offered 4 topics to vote on for an upcoming episode, and the winner was a topic that's been languishing on the to-do list for years. The 1966 musical It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman. I think some listeners suggested it many years ago, and it went on the list and just kind of stayed there for a while, and I thought, well, I'll put it on the voting list and see what happens, and it won, so...
Yeah, I think it might have been as long ago as 2016 or so that it was first suggested.
Mm-hmm. So next time we'll see how Batman 66 looks alongside Superman 66.
Yes.
So we'll see you again in 2 weeks at the same Bat RSS feed. Check the show notes for the video of all Chris Holland's rock guitar bat theme covers, the Joker Jury treatment and comics story, and the 13th Dimension pages on the collector Alfred's bat costume collection. Thanks again to David Maska, J.B. Anderton, and Chris Kavanaugh for the Adam West clip you heard in this episode. If you have any interesting bat audio that we haven't used yet on the show, or you'd like to make a donation to the show through PayPal, or just drop us a line, the address is batpoles@deconstructingcomics.com. You can also comment on the thread for each episode and each script at 66batman.com/forums or on our blog at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com. We're on Twitter at DeconComics and on the Deconstructing Comics channel on YouTube. You can hear outtakes from this and every episode of To the Batpoles and vote for topics for future episodes by supporting us at patreon.com/deconcomics. You can also help us out by shopping via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon, by sharing our episodes on your social media, and by subscribing to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And spread the word. Let all your friends who are Batman 66 fans know about the show. Next time, It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman, the Broadway musical that happened to hit the same year as Batman. Excuse me as I duck into this phone booth. We'll see you in 2 weeks. To the Batpoles is a production of DeconstructingComics.com.